Before we dive into today's story, I need everyone watching to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the stories I share here will completely change how you see relationships in life. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The phone slipped from my trembling hands, clattering against the hospital floor as those words echoed in my mind like a death sentence. Tell her I'll surprise her and the baby next week. Sir, you don't know? Your wife had a car accident. The irony was so cruel it made my stomach twist into knots. Here I was, planning a romantic surprise for my pregnant wife Emma, only to discover she was fighting for her life just 3 floors below where I stood. I'm David, and I thought I had everything figured out. 28 years old, successful marketing executive at one of Manhattan's top advertising firms, married to the most beautiful woman I'd ever laid eyes on. Emma and I had been together for 5 years, married for 2, and she was 7 months pregnant with our first child. Life was supposed to be perfect. I was supposed to be the husband who had it all together. But as I stood there in that sterile hospital corridor, still clutching the diamond necklace I'd bought for Emma's surprise, I realized how wrong I'd been about everything. How wrong I'd been about being a good husband. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because every single one of you needs to understand how quickly your entire world can crumble when you're not paying attention to what really matters. It was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind of crisp fall day that makes New York City look like a postcard. I remember because I was running late for the most important client meeting of my career. Peterson Industries was considering our agency for their $50 million campaign, and I'd been working on this pitch for 3 months straight. This was my shot at making partner before 30, my chance to prove I wasn't just another ambitious kid with a fancy degree. Emma had been trying to talk to me all week about the baby, about preparing the nursery, about her growing anxiety as we got closer to her due date. But I kept brushing her off, telling her we'd discuss it later, after the Peterson deal was locked down. Just give me 2 more weeks, I kept saying. 2 more weeks and then I'll have all the time in the world. I should have known something was wrong when she stopped trying to get my attention. Emma wasn't the type to give up easily. She was passionate, determined, the kind of woman who fought for what she believed in. When she went quiet, it usually meant she was either planning something or deeply hurt. I was too consumed with quarterly projections and creative briefs to notice which one it was. That Tuesday morning, she tried one more time. I was grabbing my coffee and scrolling through my phone when she appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing my old college sweatshirt and those ridiculous fuzzy slippers she loved. Her baby bump was really showing now, and she had this glow everyone talks about pregnant women having. She was beautiful, radiant even, but I barely looked up from my screen. David, she said softly, can we please talk about the birth plan today? The doctor wants us to finalize everything by next week, and I've been trying to discuss this with you for days. I glanced at my watch and felt that familiar spike of anxiety about being late. Not today, babe. The Peterson presentation is this afternoon, and I still need to review the numbers with Jake. Can we do this tonight? I promise we'll sit down and go through everything. She stood there for a moment, one hand resting on her belly, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes. But you said that yesterday and the day before that. David, our baby is coming in 2 months. 2 months. We can't keep putting this off. I was already heading toward the door, my mind racing through the presentation slides. I know. Tonight, okay? I'll bring home Thai food from that place you like, and we'll make it a whole evening. Birth plans, nursery colors, whatever you want to discuss. The lie came so easily it scared me. I already knew I'd be working late that night, probably until midnight, fine-tuning the campaign materials. But I told myself I'd make it up to her later. There would be time for all of this once the deal was closed. Emma followed me to the door, moving more slowly than usual. The pregnancy was making everything harder for her, and her doctor had already warned her about doing too much. You've been saying that for weeks, David. I feel like I'm planning this whole pregnancy by myself. That should have been my wake-up call. The sadness in her voice, the way she was trying so hard not to cry, the fact that my wife felt alone while carrying our child. Instead, I kissed her forehead quickly and promised we'd figure everything out soon. I'll make it up to you, I said. The same empty promise I'd been making for months. This presentation is everything, Em. Once Peterson signs with us, I'll be in line for partner, and then we can really start planning our future. She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me anymore. How many times had I prioritized work over her? How many important conversations had I postponed? How many small moments had I missed because I was always looking ahead to the next big opportunity? I left her standing in our apartment doorway, one hand on her belly, watching me disappear into another day where she came second to my career ambitions. If I'd known it would be the last normal conversation we'd ever have, I would have canceled the meeting. I would have canceled everything. But I didn't know. I couldn't see past my own selfish tunnel vision to recognize that my wife needed me more than Peterson Industries did. The presentation went perfectly. Jake and I nailed every question, every objection, every concern the client raised. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, we had a verbal commitment for the biggest deal our agency had landed all year. My boss, Catherine Morrison, was practically glowing as she shook my hand and mentioned that partnership track we'd discussed. I was on top of the world. Finally, after months of 18-hour days and missed dinners and postponed conversations with Emma, everything was paying off. I called her immediately, practically bouncing with excitement as I waited for her to answer. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, it's Emma. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." Weird. Emma always answered when I called, especially lately when she'd been wanting to talk so much. I tried again 10 minutes later. Voicemail again. I figured she might be napping. Pregnancy had been exhausting for her, and she'd been taking afternoon naps more frequently. I decided to surprise her by leaving the office early and picking up dinner from her favorite restaurant. We could finally have that conversation about birth plans, and I could share the good news about Peterson. That's when I made the call that changed everything. I wanted to do something special for Emma, something that would show her I was finally ready to prioritize our growing family. There was this jewelry store in Midtown where I'd been looking at a diamond necklace for weeks. Nothing too extravagant, just a delicate pendant with our birthstones and a tiny diamond that would represent our baby. I'd been planning to give it to her after the Peterson deal closed, as a way of celebrating both my career success and our upcoming parenthood. The jeweler, an elderly man named Mr. Chan, had been holding the necklace for me for 3 weeks. When I called to confirm I could pick it up that afternoon, he seemed excited to finally complete the sale. "Perfect timing, Mr. Morgan," he said. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind about surprising your wife." "Never," I told him. "I'm actually planning to give it to her tonight. Can you have it gift wrapped?" "Of course. The inscription you requested is beautiful, by the way. For Emma and our little miracle. She's going to love it." I felt this rush of anticipation as I hung up. Finally, I was going to get this husband thing right. I was going to show Emma that she and the baby were my priority, that all the long hours and missed dinners had been worth it because now I could provide for our family in ways I never could before. I spent the cab ride to the jewelry store planning the perfect evening. I'd pick up the necklace, stop by her favorite Thai restaurant, maybe grab some flowers from the vendor on the corner near our apartment. We'd spread all the birth plan materials on the coffee table, order way too much food, and finally have the conversations we'd been putting off for weeks. Mr. Chan had the necklace ready in a beautiful velvet box, wrapped with a silver ribbon. As I held it in my hands, I could picture Emma's face when she opened it. The way her eyes would light up, how she'd probably get a little teary the way she did whenever I managed to surprise her with something thoughtful. I was walking back toward the street, already planning my next stop at the restaurant, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. "Mr. Morgan? This is Dr. Patricia Williams from Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm calling about your wife, Emma Morgan." My heart stopped. In that instant, all the excitement about the necklace and dinner plans evaporated. Emma never goes to Mount Sinai. Our doctor is across town at Presbyterian. Why would she be at a different hospital? "Is everything okay?" I managed to ask, though I could already feel the world tilting sideways around me. "Mr. Morgan, I need you to come to the hospital immediately. Your wife has been in a serious car accident." The jewelry box slipped from my hand, hitting the sidewalk with a small crack. People walked around me as I stood there frozen, trying to process what the doctor had just told me. "Car accident. Serious. Come immediately." Is the baby? "Please just come as quickly as you can," Dr. Williams said gently. "We're doing everything possible for both of them." The next hour was a blur of taxi rides and hospital corridors and conversations with nurses who spoke in careful, measured tones. Emma had been driving to her prenatal appointment, when a delivery truck ran a red light and slammed into the passenger side of her car. The impact had been severe enough to deploy both airbags and trigger automatic emergency calls from her car's safety system. She'd been unconscious when the paramedics arrived. Unconscious and bleeding, with a steering wheel pressed against her pregnant belly. I found myself in a waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and fear, surrounded by other families dealing with their own medical emergencies. A television in the corner was playing some mindless afternoon talk show, the cheerful voices of the hosts creating a surreal contrast to the gravity of what was happening just down the hall. Dr. Williams appeared after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. She was a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair, the type of doctor who'd clearly delivered difficult news many times before. "Mr. Morgan," she said, sitting down across from me, "your wife is stable, but she's sustained significant injuries. We've managed to stop the internal bleeding, and her vital signs are improving. However, we're very concerned about the baby." The words hit me like physical blows. Internal bleeding. Concerned about the baby. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be the day I finally got my priorities straight, the day I showed Emma how much she meant to me. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. The impact caused what we call placental abruption. The placenta has partially separated from the wall of the uterus, which cuts off oxygen and nutrients to the baby. "We've performed an emergency cesarean section to deliver your son." Son. We were having a son. Emma had wanted to know the gender for months, but I'd insisted we wait until delivery because I thought it would be more exciting that way. Now I was learning we had a son from a doctor in a hospital waiting room, while Emma lay unconscious down the hall. "He's alive," Dr. Williams said quickly, and I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. "But he's very premature at 32 weeks, and his condition is critical. He's in the neonatal intensive care unit, and the next 48 hours will be crucial." "Can I see them? Can I see Emma and the baby?" "Your wife is still sedated from surgery, but yes, you can see her briefly. And we can take you to the NICU to meet your son." Meet your son. The phrase should have filled me with joy, but all I felt was terror and guilt. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be giving Emma a necklace tonight and discussing birth plans over Thai food. Instead, I was about to meet my premature son in an intensive care unit, while my wife recovered from emergency surgery. The NICU was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The constant beeping of monitors, the soft whoosh of ventilators, the controlled chaos of nurses and doctors moving between isolates containing the tiniest human beings I'd ever seen. And there, in isolate number 7, was my son. He was so small. So impossibly, heartbreakingly small. Tubes and wires covered his tiny body, and his chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the machine breathing for him. But his fingers were perfect, miniature versions of my own, and when I reached through the porthole to touch his hand, his fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. "He's beautiful," said the NICU nurse, a young woman named Sarah who'd been taking care of him since delivery. "He's a fighter just like his mom." That's when it hit me. Emma had been fighting for her life and our son's life while I was celebrating a client meeting. While I was picking out jewelry and planning surprise dinners, she was lying in a hospital emergency room with internal bleeding and a baby in distress. The worst part was realizing that if I'd been paying attention, if I'd noticed she was more tired lately or that she'd seemed worried about something, maybe I could have prevented this. Maybe if I'd gone to her prenatal appointment with her instead of staying at the office to review presentation materials, the accident never would have happened. But there was something else. Something I didn't discover until I was finally allowed to see Emma 2 hours later. She was awake when I entered her room, though heavily medicated and connected to multiple monitors. Her face was bruised from the airbag deployment, and there were cuts on her arms from broken glass. But she was conscious, and when she saw me she tried to smile. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The baby. Is he okay?" I sat down beside her bed and took her hand, careful not to disturb the 4 lines. "He's in the NICU, but he's fighting. He's strong just like his mother." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I was coming to tell you something important. That's why I was driving to the appointment early." The appointment wasn't for another hour, I realized. Why had she left so early? What was so important that she couldn't wait to share it with me that evening? "What did you need to tell me?" I asked, though something in her expression made me afraid to hear the answer. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a sadness that had nothing to do with the accident. I was going to tell you that I can't do this anymore, David. I can't be married to someone who's never actually present, even when he's in the same room. I was going to ask Dr. Martinez to help me figure out how to handle the rest of the pregnancy on my own. The words hit me harder than any news about internal bleeding or premature delivery. She'd been planning to leave me. While I was busy planning surprise dinners and buying jewelry, my wife had been planning to raise our child as a single mother. Emma, I started, but she held up a weak hand to stop me. I was coming to tell you that I love you, but I can't keep loving someone who doesn't have room in his life for his family. I was going to suggest we separate until after the baby is born, and then figure out what comes next. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. All those postponed conversations, all those times I'd promised we'd talk later, all those moments when I'd chosen work over her needs had been adding up to this. She'd been trying to save our marriage by starting the conversation about our problems, and I'd been too busy chasing a promotion to listen. The accident happened because I was crying, she continued, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. I was so upset about having to plan leaving you that I wasn't paying attention to the road. I saw the truck, but I couldn't react fast enough. No, I said firmly, squeezing her hand. This accident was not your fault. None of this is your fault. But it was my fault in every way that mattered. My neglect had driven her to the point where she felt she had to choose between staying married and protecting her own emotional well-being. My priorities had been so backwards that my pregnant wife felt more supported facing parenthood alone than staying married to me. That night, I sat in the NICU beside our son's isolette, watching him fight for every breath while I tried to figure out how to fight for my family. The necklace I'd bought was still in my jacket pocket, the inscription now feeling like a mockery of how badly I'd failed as a husband. For Emma and our little miracle, it read. But what kind of miracle allows a woman to nearly lose her life because her husband was too selfish to pay attention to her needs? The next few days were the longest of my life. Emma's physical recovery progressed steadily. The internal bleeding had stopped, her bruises were healing, and her strength was slowly returning. But our son remained critical, his tiny lungs not yet ready to function on their own. I took a leave of absence from work, much to Catherine's dismay. The Peterson deal would have to be managed by Jake and the rest of the team. For the first time in my career, I chose my family over a professional opportunity, though I was terrified it might be too late to matter. I spent 18 hours a day at the hospital, splitting time between Emma's room and the NICU. I learned to change micropreemie diapers, how to read the confusing displays on medical monitors, and how to hold conversations with nurses about ventilator settings and feeding tubes. It was a crash course in being a father under the worst possible circumstances. But the hardest part was the conversations with Emma. Now that she'd revealed her plans to leave me, we couldn't pretend anymore that our marriage was fine. We had to talk about all the ways I'd failed her, all the times I prioritized everything else over our relationship. I never felt like I mattered to you, she told me during one of our late-night talks while the baby slept between us in his isolette. Even when you were home, you were always thinking about work. Always checking your phone. Always mentally preparing for the next meeting or client call. She was right and I knew it. I'd been treating our marriage like something that would maintain itself while I focused on building my career. I'd assumed that because Emma loved me, she would always be there waiting when I finally had time to pay attention to her. I thought if I could just make partner, everything would get easier, I admitted. I thought if I could provide financial security for our family, that would be enough. But I never asked you to choose between loving me and being successful, David. I just wanted you to include me in your life instead of treating me like an obligation you'd get around to eventually. That conversation happened on our son's third day in the NICU, and it was the moment I truly understood what I'd almost lost. Not just Emma, not just our marriage, but the opportunity to be the kind of father and husband I'd always claimed I wanted to be. I made a decision that night that would change everything. I called Catherine Morrison and resigned from the partnership track. I would stay with the agency, but in a reduced capacity that would allow me to be present for my family in the way I should have been all along. Catherine thought I was having some kind of breakdown. David, she said, this is exactly the wrong time to make major career decisions. You're under stress, your family is dealing with a medical crisis, but this will pass. Don't throw away everything you've worked for because you're feeling guilty. It's not guilt, I told her. It's clarity. I almost lost my wife and son because I thought professional success was more important than being emotionally available to my family. I won't make that mistake again. When I told Emma about my decision the next day, she cried. Not because she was happy exactly, but because it was the first time I'd made a choice that prioritized our relationship over my career ambitions. You don't have to give up everything you've worked for, she said. I just need to know that I matter to you as much as your job does. You matter more, I told her, and I meant it. You and our son matter more than any promotion or client or partnership. I should have realized that months ago. Our son, who we finally named James after Emma's grandfather, spent 6 weeks in the NICU. 6 weeks of ventilators and feeding tubes and daily weight checks and small improvements followed by terrifying setbacks. But slowly, gradually, he grew stronger. Emma and I spent those 6 weeks having the conversations we should have been having for months. We talked about our expectations for marriage, about balancing career and family responsibilities, about how to communicate better when life gets stressful. We talked about forgiveness, both giving it and accepting it. Most importantly, we talked about what kind of parents we wanted to be. Not just logistically, like the birth plan conversations I'd been avoiding, but philosophically. What values did we want to instill in James? How could we model a healthy relationship for him? How could we make sure he never felt like he came second to our professional ambitions? The day James was finally strong enough to come home was the day I gave Emma the necklace I'd bought during that last normal afternoon before the accident. The inscription felt different now, more meaningful somehow, because we'd almost lost our little miracle in each other. She cried when she read it, but they were good tears this time. Tears of relief and gratitude and hope for the future we were going to build together. That was 3 years ago. James is now a healthy, energetic toddler who keeps us both on our toes. I work for a smaller agency now, one that values work-life balance and treats employees like human beings rather than productivity machines. I make less money than I would have as a partner at my old firm, but I've never been happier. Emma and I renewed our wedding vows on James's first birthday, a small ceremony in our backyard with just family and close friends. It felt like starting over, like getting married to the person I'd become instead of the person I used to be. But the most important change is how I approach every day now. I wake up each morning thinking about how to be present for my family, not how to advance my career. I ask Emma how she's feeling and actually listen to her answer. I pay attention to James's milestones and moods and needs instead of treating fatherhood like something I can manage with partial attention. The accident taught me that life is fragile and unpredictable, that the people we love can be gone in an instant, and that professional success means nothing if you don't have anyone to share it with. More importantly, it taught me that being a good husband and father requires daily choices, conscious decisions to prioritize your family over everything else that feels urgent, but isn't actually important. I still think about that phone call sometimes. Tell her I'll surprise her and the baby next week. Sir, you don't know? Your wife had a car accident. I think about how different our story could have been if I'd been paying attention to Emma's needs before crisis forced me to recognize them. But I also think about how lucky we are that we got a second chance. Not every family survives the kind of trauma we experienced. Not every marriage recovers from the level of neglect I'd allowed to build up between us. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're putting off important conversations with your spouse or missing your children's milestones because work feels more pressing, please don't wait for a crisis to wake you up. Don't assume the people you love will always be there waiting for you to finally have time for them. Choose your family today. Choose to be present, to listen, to prioritize the relationships that actually matter over the achievements that only matter to your ego. Choose to surprise your loved ones with your attention and care, not just your gifts and grand gestures. Because the truth is, none of us knows when we might get that phone call that changes everything. None of us knows when our last normal day with the people we love might actually be our last normal day. Don't waste time on regret like I almost did. Don't wait until it's almost too late to realize what really matters. Your family needs you now, not next week or next month or after the next big project is finished. They need you present, engaged, emotionally available. They need you to choose them every single day, over everything else that competes for your attention. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible, but I learned it in time to save my marriage and build the kind of relationship with my son that I'd always claimed I wanted to have. You don't have to wait for a crisis to teach you what I had to learn in a hospital waiting room. You can choose to be different starting today. Choose your family. Choose love. Choose to be present. Before you click away from this video, I want you to do something for me. I want you to put down your phone, close your laptop, and go find the people you love. Tell them they matter to you. Ask them how they're feeling. Listen to their answers. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own priorities and relationships, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes we all need a reminder about what's really important in life. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about love, family, and second chances. And remember, it's never too late to choose the people you love over everything else. Until next time, choose love. Choose family. Choose to be present for the people who matter most.